All right, guys. I've been obsessed with this chord progression. So, I don't have that many people on yet, but I got some things planned. A few things I want to read. Let me get them out real quick. I've just been playing guitar. That's all I've been doing recently. Late. All right. So I got some things to read. First thing I wanted to read was Nathaniel Hawthorne. Figured we're doing some Hawthorne earlier, could do some more. This one's called Endicott and the Red Cross. I was reminded of it by my friend Mage because he's been reading Hawthorne, but I hadn't read this one in a while, so I'll read it for you all. It's called Endicott and the Red Cross. It's from Twice Told Tales, Volume 2. At noon on an autumnal day more than 2 centuries ago, the English colors were displayed by the standard bearer of the Salem train band, which had mustered for martial exercise under the orders of John Endicott. It was a period when the religious exiles were accustomed often to buckle on their armor and practice the handling of their weapons of war. Since the first settlement of New England, its prospects had never been so dismal. The dissensions between Charles I and his subjects were then, and for several years afterwards, confined to the floor of Parliament. The measures of the king and ministry were rendered more tyrannically violent by an opposition which had not yet acquired sufficient confidence in its own strength to resist royal injustice with the sword. The bigoted and haughty primate, Laud, Archbishop of Canterbury, controlled the religious affairs of the realm and was consequently invested with powers which might have wrought the utter ruin of the two Puritan colonies, Plymouth and Massachusetts. There is evidence on record that our forefathers perceived their danger, but were resolved that their infant country should not fall without a struggle, even beneath the giant strength of the king's right arm. Such were the aspect of the times when the folds of the English banner, with the red cross in its field, were flung out over a company of Puritans. Their leader, the famous Endicott, was a man of stern and resolute countenance, the effect of which was heightened by a grizzled beard that swept the upper portion of his breastplate. The piece of armor was so highly polished that the whole surrounding scene had its image in the glittering steel. The central object in the mirrored picture was an edifice of humble architecture with neither steeple nor bell to proclaim it. What nevertheless it was, the house of prayer. A token of the perils of the wilderness was seen in the grim head of a wolf, which had just been slain within the precincts of the town, and, according to the regular mode of claiming the bounty, was nailed on the porch of the meeting house. The blood was still plashing on the doorstep. There happened to be visible at the same noontide hour so many other characteristics of the times and manners of the Puritans that we must endeavor to represent them in a sketch, though far less vividly than they were reflected in the polished breastplate of John Endicott. In close vicinity to the sacred edifice appeared that important engine of Puritanic authority, the whipping post, with the soil around it well trodden by the feet of evildoers who had there been disciplined. At one corner of the meeting house was the pillory, and at the other the stocks, and by a single good fortune for our sketch, the head of an Episcopalian and suspected Catholic was grotesquely encased in the former machine, while a fellow criminal who had boisterously quaffed the health to the king was confided by the legs in the latter. Side by side on the meeting house steps stood a male and a female figure. The male was a tall, lean, haggard personification of fanaticism, bearing on his breast this label, a wanton gospeler, which betokened that he had dared to give interpretations of Holy Writ unsanctioned by the infallible judgment of the civil and religious rulers. His aspect showed no lack of zeal to maintain his heterodoxy, even at the stake. The woman wore a cleft stick on her tongue, in appropriate retribution for having wagged that unruly member against the elders of the church, and her countenance and gestures gave much cause to apprehend that the moment this stick should be removed, a repetition of the offense would demand new ingenuity in chastising it. The above mentioned individuals had been sentenced to undergo their various modes of ignominy for the spaces of 1 hour at noonday. But among the crowd were several whose punishments would be lifelong, some whose ears had been cropped like those of puppy dogs, others whose cheeks had been branded with the initials of their misdemeanors, one with his nostrils slit and seared, and another with a halter about his neck, which he had was forbidden ever to take off or to conceal beneath his garments. Methinks he must have been grievously tempted to affix the other end of the rope to some convenient beam or bough. There was likewise a young woman with no mean share of beauty, whose doom it was to wear the letter A on the breast of her gown in the eyes of all the world and her own children. And even her own children knew what the initials signified. Sporting with her infamy, the lost and desperate creature had embroidered the fatal token in scarlet cloth with golden thread and the nicest art of needlework, so that the capital A might have been thought to mean admirable, or anything rather than adulteress. Let not the reader argue from any of these evidences of iniquity that the times of the Puritans were more vicious than our own, when, as we pass along the very street of this sketch, we discern no badge of infamy on man or woman. It was the policy of our ancestors to search out even the most secret sins and expose them to shame without fear or favor in the broadest light of the noonday sun. Were such the custom now, perchance we might find materials for a no less piquant sketch than the above. Except the malefactors whom we have described and the diseased or infirm persons, the whole male population of the town, between 16 years and 60, were seen in the ranks of the train band. A few stately savages, in all the pomp and dignity of the primeval Indian, stood gazing at the spectacle. Their flint-headed arrows were but childish weapons compared with the matchlocks of the Puritans, and would have rattled harmlessly against the steel caps and hammered iron breastplates, which enclosed each soldier in an individual fortress. The valiant John Endicott glanced with an eye of pride at his sturdy followers and prepared to renew the martial toils of the day. One sec. Sorry, folks, it's like 32 degrees outside right now. Endicott prepared to renew the martial toils of the day. Come, my stout hearts, quoth he, drawing his sword. Let us show these poor heathen that we can handle our weapons like men of might. Well for them, if they put us not to prove it in earnest. The iron-breasted company straightened their line, and each man drew the heavy butt of his matchlock close to his left foot, thus awaiting the orders of the captain. But as Endicott glanced right and left along the front, he discovered a personage at some little distance with whom it had behooved him to hold a parley. It was an elderly gentleman wearing a black cloak and band and a high crowned hat, beneath which was a velvet skull cap, the whole being the garb of a Puritan minister. This reverend bore his staff, which seemed to have been recently cut in the forest, and his shoes were bemired, as if he had been traveling on foot through the swamps of the wilderness. His aspect was perfectly that of a pilgrim, heightened also by an apostolic dignity. Just as Endicott perceived him, he laid aside his staff and stooped to drink at the bubbling fountain, which gushed into the sunshine about a score of yards from the corner of the meeting house. But ere the good man drank, he turned his face heavenward in thankfulness, and then, holding back his gray beard with one hand, he scooped up his simple draught in the hollow of the other. What ho, good Williams! Shouted Endicott. You are welcome back again to our town of peace. How does our worthy Governor Winthrop, and what news from Boston? The governor hath his health, worshipful sir, answered Roger Williams, now resuming his staff and drawing near. And for the news, here is a letter which, knowing I was to travel hitherward today, his excellency commended to my charge. Belike it contains tidings of much import, for a ship arrived yesterday from England. Mr. Williams, the minister of Salem, and of course known to all the spectators, had now reached the spot where Endicott was standing under the banner of his company, and put the governor's epistle into his hand. The broad seal was impressed with Winthrop's coat of arms. Endicott hastily unclosed the letter and began to read, while, as his eye passed down the page, a wrathful change came over his manly countenance. The blood glowed through it, till it seemed to be kindling with an internal heat. Nor was it unnatural to suppose that his breastplate would likewise become red hot, with the angry fire of the bosom which it covered arriving at the conclusion. He shook the letter fiercely in his hand, so that it rustled as loud as the flag above his head. Black tidings these, Mr. Williams, said he. Blacker never came to New England. Doubtless you know their purport. Yea, truly, replied Roger Williams, for the governor consulted respecting this matter with my brethren in the ministry at Boston, and my opinion was likewise asked. And his excellency entreats you by me that the news be not suddenly noised abroad, lest the people be stirred up into some outbreak, and thereby give the king and the archbishop a handle against us. The governor is a wise man, and a meek and moderate, said Endicott, setting his teeth grimly. Nevertheless, I must do according to my own best judgment. There's neither man nor woman nor child in New England, but has a concern as dear as life in these tidings. And if John Endicott's voice be loud enough, man, woman, and child shall hear them. Soldiers, wheel into a hollow square. Ho, good people, here are news for one and all of you. The soldiers closed in around their captain, and he and Roger Williams stood together under the banner of the Red Cross, while the women and the aged men pressed forward, and the mothers held up their children to look Endicott in the face. A few taps of the drum gave signal for silence and attention. Fellow soldiers, fellow exiles, began Endicott, speaking under strong excitement, yet powerfully restraining it. Wherefore did ye leave your native country? Wherefore, I say, have we left the green and fertile fields, the cottages, or perchance the old grey halls where we were born and bred, the churchyards where our forefathers lie buried? Wherefore have we come hither to set up our own tombstones in a wilderness? A howling wilderness it is. The wolf and the bear meet us within halloo of our dwellings. The savage lieth in wait for us in the dismal shadow of the woods. The stubborn roots of the trees break our plowshares when we would till the earth. Our children cry for bread, and we must dig in the sands of the seashore to satisfy them. Wherefore, I say again, have we sought this country of a rugged soil and wintry sky? Was it not for the enjoyment of our civil rights? Was it not for liberty to worship God according to our conscience? Call you this liberty of conscience? Interrupted a voice on the steps of the meeting house. It was the wanton gospeler. A sad and quiet smile flitted across the mild visage of Roger Williams, but Endicott, in the excitement of the moment, shook his sword wrathfully at the culprit, an ominous gesture from a man like him. "What hast thou to do with conscience, thou knave?" cried he. "I said liberty to worship God, not license to profane and ridicule him. Break not in upon my speech, or I'll lay thee neck and heels till this time tomorrow. Hearken to me, friends, nor heed that accursed rhapsodist. As I was saying, we have sacrificed all things and have come to a land whereof the old world hath scarcely heard, that we might make a new world unto ourselves, and painfully seek a path from hence to heaven. And what think ye now? This son of a Scotch tyrant, this grandson of a papistical and adulterous Scotchwoman, whose death proved that a golden crown cloth not always save an anointed head from the block? Nay, brother, nay, interposed Mr. Williams. Thy words are not meet for a secret chamber, far less for a public street. Hold thy peace, Roger Williams, answered Endicott imperiously. My spirit is wiser than shine. For the business now in hand, I tell ye, fellow exiles, that Charles of England and Laud, our bitterest persecutor, archpriest of Canterbury, are resolute to pursue us even hither. They are taking counsel, saith this letter, to send over a governor general, in whose breast shall be deposited all the law and equity of the land. They are minded also to establish the idolatrous forms of English episcopacy, so that when Laud shall kiss the Pope's toe as Cardinal of Rome, he may deliver New England bound hand and foot into the power of his master. A deep groan from the auditors, a sound of wrath, as well as fear and sorrow, responded to this intelligence. "Look ye to it, brethren," resumed Endicott with increasing energy. "If this king and this arch-prelate have their will, we shall briefly behold a cross on the spire of this tabernacle which we have builded, and a high altar within its walls, with wax tapers burning around it at noonday. We shall hear the sacring bell, and the voices of the Romish priests saying the mass. But think ye, Christian men, that these abominations may be suffered without a sword drawn, without a shot fired, without blood spilt, yea, on the very stairs of this pulpit? No. Be ye strong of hand and stout of heart. Here we stand on our own soil, which we have bought with our goods, which we have won with our swords, which we have cleared with our axes, which we have tilled with the sweat of our brows, which we have sanctified with our prayers to the God that brought us hither. Who shall enslave us here? What have we to do with this metered prelate, with this crowned king? What have we to do with England?" Endicott gazed round at the excited countenances of the people, now full of his own spirit, and then turned suddenly to the standard bearer, who stood close behind him. "Officer, lower your banner," said he. The officer obeyed, and brandishing his sword, Endicott thrust it through the cloth, and with his left hand rent the red cross completely out of the banner. He then waved the tattered ensign above his head. "Sacrilegious wretch!" cried the high churchman in the pillory, unable longer to restrain himself. "Thou hast rejected the symbol of our holy religion." "Treason! Treason!" roared the royalist in the stocks. "He hath defaced the king's banner." "Before God and man I will avouch the deed," answered Endicott. "Beat a flourish, drummer! Shout, soldiers and people, in honor of the ensign of New England! Neither pope nor tyrant hath pardoned it now." With a cry of triumph, the people gave their sanction to one of the boldest exploits which our history records. And forever honored by the name of Endicott, we look back through the mist of ages and recognize it in the rending of the red cross from New England's banner, the first omen of that deliverance which our fathers consummated after the bones of the stern Puritan had lain more than a century in the dust. Enough said. Anyway, I wanted to compare this with a poem from a bit before this era, just before really, by George Herbert, who was a slight contemporary of Shakespeare, coming around in like the second generation of that. You know, Shakespeare is already established by the time this guy's writing. But he's writing a similar thing about the church militant. Hold up. It's too cold to light a cigarette. Jesus Christ. There we go. Here's the poem. It's called The Church Militant by George Herbert. Almighty Lord, who from thy glorious throne seest and rulest all things even as one, the smallest ant or atom knows thy power, known also to each minute of an hour. Much more do commonwealths acknowledge thee and wrap their policies in thy decree, complying with thy counsels, doing naught which doth not meet with an eternal thought. But above all, thy church in spout doth prove, not the decrees of power, but bands of love. Early didst thou arise to plant this vine, which might the more increase it to be thine. Spices come from the east, so did thy spouse, trim as the light, sweet as the laden boughs of Noah's shady vine, chaste as the dove, prepared and fitted to receive thy love. The course was westward, that the sun might light as well our understanding as our sight. Where the ark did rest, there Abraham began to bring the other ark from Canaan. Moses pursued this, but King Solomon finished and fixed the old religion. When it grew loose, the Jews did hope in vain by nailing Christ to fasten it again. But to the Gentiles he bore a cross and all, rending with earthquakes the partition wall. Only whereas the ark in glory shone, now with the cross as with the staff alone. Religion, like a pilgrim westward bent, knocking at all doors ever as she went. Yet as the sun, though forward be his flight, listens behind him and allows some light till all depart, so went the church her way, letting, while one foot stepped, the other stay among the eastern nation for a time, till both removed to the western clime. To Egypt first she came, where they did prove wonders of anger once, but now of love. The 10 commandments there did flourish more than the 10 bitter plagues had done before. Holy Macarius and great Anthony made Pharaoh Moses, changing the history. Goshen was darkness, Egypt full of light. Nihilus for monsters brought forth Israelites. Such power hath mighty baptism to produce for things misshapen, things of highest use. How dear to me, O God, thy counsels are. Who may with thee compare? Religion thence fled into Greece, where arts gave her the highest place in all men's hearts. Learning was posed, philosophy was set, sophisters taken in a fisher's net. Plato and Aristotle were at a loss, wheeled about again to spell Christ cross. Prayers chased syllogisms into their den, and ergo was transformed into amen. Though Greece took horse as soon as Egypt did, and Rome as both, yet Egypt faster rid and spent her period and prefixed time before the other. Greece being past her prime, religion went to Rome, subduing those who that they might subdue made all their foes. The warrior, his dear scars no more resounds, but seems to yield Christ hath the greater wounds, wounds willingly endured to work his bliss, who by an ambush lost his paradise. The great heart stoops and taketh from the dust a sad repentance, not the spoils of lust. Quitting his spear, lest it should pierce again him in his members, who for him was slain. The shepherd's hook grew to a scepter here, giving new names and numbers to the year. But the empire dwelt in Greece to comfort them who were cut short in Alexander's stem. In both of these, prowess and arts did tame, and tunes men's hearts against the gospel came, which using and not fearing skill in the one or strength in the other, did erect her throne. Many a rent and struggling the empire knew, as dying things are wont, until it flew at length to Germany, still westward bending, and there the church's festival attending, that as before empire and arts made way, for no less harbingers would serve than they. So they might still and point us out the place where first the church should raise her downcast face. Strength levels grounds, art makes a garden there, then showers religion and makes all to bear. Spain in the empire shared with Germany, but England in the higher victory, giving the church a crown to keep her state, and not go less than she had done of late. Constantine's British line meant this of old, and did this mystery wrap up and fold within a sheet of paper which was rent from time's great chronicle and hither sent. Thus both the church and sun together ran unto the farthest old meridian. How dare to me, O God, thy counsels are? Who may with thee compare? Much about one in the same time and place, both where and when the church began her race, sin did set out of eastern Babylon and traveled westward also, journeying on. He chid the church away where'er he came, breaking her peace and tainting her good name. At first he got to Egypt and did sow gardens of gods, which every year did grow, fresh and fine deities. They were at great cost, who were for a god clearly a sallet loss. Ah, what a thing is man devoid of grace, adoring garlic with an humble face, begging his food of that which he may eat, starving the while he worshippeth his meat. Who makes a root his God? How low is he? If God and man be severed infinitely, what wretchedness could give him any room whose house is foul while he adores his broom? None will believe this now, though money be in us the same transplanted foolery. Thus sin in Egypt sneaked for a while. His highest was an ox or crocodile, and such poor game. Thence he to Greece doth pass, and being craftier much than goodness was, he left behind him garrisons of sins, to make good that which every day he wins. Here sin took heart, and for a garden bed, much rich shrines and oracles he purchased. He grew a gallant, and would's need foretell as well what should befall as what befell. Nay, he became a poet and would serve his pills of sublimate in that conserve. The world came in with hands and purses full to this great lottery, and all would pull, but all was his glorious cheating, brave deceit, where some poor truths were shuffled for a bait to credit him and to discredit those who after him should braver truths disclose. From Greece he went to Rome, and as before, he was a god. Now he's an emperor. Nero and others lodged him bravely there, put him in trust to rule the Roman sphere. Glory was his chief instrument of old. Pleasure succeeded straight when that grew cold, which soon was blown to such a mighty flame that though our Savior did destroy the game, disparking oracles and all their treasure, setting affliction to encounter pleasure, yet did a rogue with a hope of carnal joy cheat the most subtle nations. Who so coy, so trim as Greece and Egypt, yet their hearts are given over for their curious arts to such Mahometan stupidities as the old heathen would deem prodigies. How dear to me, O God, thy counsels are, who may with thee compare? Only the West and Rome do keep them free from this contagious infidelity, and this all the rock whereof thy boast, as Rome will one day find unto her cost. Sin being not able to extirpate quite the church is here, bravely resolved one might to be a churchman too, and wear a mitre, and old debauched ruffians would turn writer. I saw him in his study where he sate, busy in controversy sprung of late, a gown and pen become his wondrous well. His grave aspect had more of heaven than hell. Only there was a handsome picture by, to which he lent the corner of his eye, as sin in Greece a prophet was before, and in old Rome a mighty emperor. So now being priest, he plainly did profess to make a jest of Christ's three offices. The rather, since his scattered jugglings were, and tied now in one, both time and sphere. From Egypt he took petty deities, from Greece oracular infallibilities, and from old Rome the liberty of pleasure, by free dispensings of the church's treasure. Then in memorial of his ancient throne he did surname his palace Babylon. Yet that he might the better gain all nations and make that name good by their transmigrations from all these places, but at diverse times he took fine vizards to conceal his crimes. From Egypt, anchorism and retiredness, learning from Greece, from old Rome, stateliness. And blending these, he carried all men's eyes, while truth sat by, counting his victories, whereby he grew apace and scorned to use such force as once did captivate the Jews, but did bewitch and finally work each nation into a voluntary transmigration. All post to Rome, prince submit their necks, either to his public foot or private tricks. It did not fit his gravity to stir, nor his long journey, nor his gout and fur. Therefore he sent out able ministers, statesmen within, without doors, cloisterers, who without spear or sword or other drum, than what was in their tongue did overcome, and having conquered, did so strangely rule, that the whole world did seem but the Pope's mule, as new and old Rome did one empire twist. So both together are one Antichrist, yet with two faces, as their Janus was, being in this their old cracked looking glass. How dear to me, O God, thy counsels are. Who may with thee compare? Thus sin triumphs in Western Babylon, yet not as sin, but as religion. Of his two thrones he made the latter best, and to defray his journey from the east, old and new. Babylon are to hell and night what the one did set, the other did take place, confronting equally the law and grace. They are hell's landmarks, Satan's double crest. They are sin's nipples feeding the east and west. But as in vice, the copy still exceeds the pattern, but not so in virtuous deeds. So, though sin made his latter seat the better, the latter church is to the first the debtor. The second temple could not reach the first, and the late Reformation never durst compare with ancient times and purer years. But in the Jews in us deserveth tears. Nay, it shall every year decrease and fade, till such a darkness do the world invade at Christ's last coming, as his first did find. Yet must there such proportion be assigned to these diminishings, as is between the spacious world and Jewry to be seen. Religion stands on tiptoe in our land, ready to pass to the American strand. When height of malice and prodigious lusts, impudent sinning, witchcrafts and distrusts, the marks of future bane, shall fill our cup unto the brim and make our measure up. When Seine shall follow Tiber and the Thames, by letting in them both pollutes her streams. When Italy of us shall have her will, and all her calendar of sins fulfill, whereby one may foretell what sins next year shall both in France and England domineer, then shall religion to America flee. They have their times of gospel, even as we. My God, thou dost prepare for them a way by carrying first their gold from them away. For gold and grace did never yet agree. Religion always sides with poverty. We think we rob them, but we think amiss. We are more poor, and they more rich by this. Thou wilt revenge their quarrel, making grace to pay our debts, and leave her ancient place to go to them, while that which now their nation but lends to us shall be our desolation. Yet as the church shall thither westward fly, so sin shall trace and dog her instantly. They have their period also and set times, both for their virtuous actions and their crimes. And where of old the empire and the arts ushered the gospel ever in men's hearts, Spain hath done one, when arts perform the other. The church shall come, and sin the church shall smother, that when they have accomplished their round, and met in the east their first and ancient sound, judgment may meet them both, and search them round. Thus do both lights as well in church as sun, light one another, and together run. Thus also sin and darkness follow still, the church and stun with all their power and skill. But as the stun still goes both west and east, so also did the church by going west still eastward go, because it drew more near to time and place where judgment shall appear. How dear to me, O God, thy counsels are. Who may with thee compare? What, how prophetic of a poem in the late 16th century, early 17th century, to describe that America America is where the gospel would flourish. But it was not just that, but it would go westward across the entirety of the Americas. And then, when that was breached, when the gospel had conquered the entirety of the Americas, it would go further west and arrive back in the east. And at this time, America would be overcome with empire and with Antichrist. America would act the role of the empire in world history. And what does George Herbert say in this? That is the end times. Almost 500 years ago. How did he know that that's what was going to happen? It's amazing, right? I just think it's amazing. Well, those are the two things I wanted to read. I think that they're an interesting thing to put next to each other because we start off with Hawthorne in the 19th century, looking back at the 17th century and the lead up to the English Civil War as it took place in New England, where the term New England even comes from is from this rejection of Charles. because they sided with the Roundheads. The Puritans were the Roundheads, obviously. They were one and the same. So they did not support the king, and they did not support the Episcopal Church, the Anglican Church. They were dissenters. So why is that? Why is that? Is because they're rejecting it for the same reasons George Herbert says that they would come to reject it when they went to America. But George Herbert sees further into the future than Hawthorne in this tale, at least, of Twice Told Tales. And he spells out, don't be too proud of this. For instance, his English countrymen, he's saying we're kind of being overtaken by empire now after we've had our golden age. And he's living through it. He's living through the time of Elizabeth and James. And he says the future is in America, but Americans ultimately will be overcome with sin in the same way that the church has always been overcome in its transit from east to west. That this is the schema of history, such that it's a pattern. It's a pattern which can then inform judgments upon the future, such that this poem, written 450 years ago, completely accurately sums up our position at its end. At its end, we are where the poem says we will be. This is a miracle to me. That's what I consider to be a miracle, is that the world, the way things are, is graspable, such that one can actually prophesy such things like this and be correct. That's a miracle to me. Anyway, I'm probably just going to screw around on the guitar unless anyone wants to talk about anything in particular. My hands are freezing. It's like 30 degrees out right now. Some of you didn't get to hear this chord progression, so. Anyway, my fingers are too cold to do finger picking on this, but I'll record some stuff for later shows. I've been playing guitar mostly. Mage, what's up? Mage, you're the reason for me reading this one, because you reminded me of it. The Endicott. How's Japan, Mage?
I'm getting tired of it. It's like if you don't speak the language, it's basically Disneyland where you just hop from 24/7 7-Eleven to 24/7 7-Eleven. It's
Yeah.
good. I'm a little tired of it.
Yeah. That's how it is that's how I always feel whenever I'm anywhere, like in another country, like for like a week and a half about. I'm like, this rocks. And then I'm like, okay, I want to go back to America.
That's about when I felt it. Yeah, like it was like a week in Tokyo, and then I did like half a week in Kyoto, and then after that, I was like, I'm done because all I did in Kyoto was like, I don't know, people just gave me drinks for free, and I just like did like two all-nighters drinking. It was not good.
Well, that
Uh,
sounds fun.
it
So,
was really fun.
well, thanks for reminding me of the Hawthorne story about Endicott to
Oh,
read,
dude,
because
it's so
it
good.
gets me amped.
It had me
Gets me
fucking.
all amped
I
up.
was like, sitting in this, 24/7 cafe in Sapporo, and I love America, dude. I want to be back in America. I've got like 3 more days here. I've got 8 hours on a train tomorrow because I'm going all the way from Hokkaido back to Tokyo. So,
Nice. That'll be fun. The trains are nice there. That should
oh
be a
yeah,
nice train ride.
oh yeah, I love the trains. The trains are a highlight of the trip for sure. Um,
Beautiful. Well, thanks for coming on, man. I want to give other people a shot.
oh, for
Um,
sure. That definitely not.
so
I'm
we'll
gonna pick
see.
it up with Travelog
All right. Peace, man.
later, man.
All right. Anyone got anything? I guess I could show you the other thing I was gonna do, which is you can if you transpose a hymn down a half a step, you get like a nasty sounding like country song. Like All her merchants stand with wonder. What is this that's come to pass? Murmuring like the distant thunder, crying, oh, alas, alas. Swell the sound, you kings and nobles, priests and people rich and poor. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen to rise no more. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen to rise no more. Blow the trumpet on Mount Zion, for the kings are all brought down. Once ruled with rods of iron and wore our fortunes on their crowns. Fables, garments we've rejected, and they'll find us nevermore. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen to rise no more. But I've been doing stuff like that. All right, Rick Mendoza. What you got for me, pal? What can I help you with?
Howdy.
What's up?
Oh, just wanted to talk to you about the philology of and engage in some electrochemical uh, activity, aka thought.
Cool. So, what you got a question or what's up?
I was listening to I think it was like George Borges or something. He was talking about like how Shakespeare hasn't been well like translated into Spanish, and I was thinking about when you were reading these poems about like how I would translate some of these words into Spanish. Like I was thinking about like malefactor and stuff, and like a lot of that, like how to.
Yeah, I mean, malefactor's pretty romantic. You like romance based, right? Like malefactor, it's Latin. So that one would be pretty easy to
Well, what
translate.
about like heat and stuff? Like I was
Like
like
what?
the philology of like heat or like heat
Heat?
and thee. Like I like a lot of like English uses like.
Oh, like thine and thee. I mean, we don't use those anymore, but I think they still maintain some honorifics in Spanish. You'd have to like translate into like old school Castilian.
Yeah, I feel like that tongue is like still like Joycean, like like he kind of like carries this with even like today with like rap and stuff. Like if you hear like doom or even all forms, like they'll use like the adding that enunciation at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I was watching this thing about what like the future consonant shifts of America are going to sound like or whatever. But basically, we're just all going to like the dominant things are like African American vernacular English is as they call it AAVE or Ebonics as it used to be called
Yeah,
is basically just like what's happening with our language in general. And it's like I don't know. I think that that's inevitable. It's a more poetic sounding in the sense that it affords you more rhymes and you can like slur words together better. That's why country people you have like the British genteel accent, but really the folksier accents are the ones that are where all the poetry is. Like Shakespeare sounds like a sailor actually, when they read it the wrong
yeah.
way now. I could have done it more. I could have done more of like the 17th century pronunciation when I was reading that one because there's a ton of rhymes that don't work anymore, like infamy for infamy and things like that.
Yeah, you were like a Mary Ann and like and he was
Or
just
like
writing.
to prove would be to prove because it rhymes with love. Like no man ever proved is the line in the sonnets. No man ever proved, then no man ever loved.
Do you think like so like you're yeah with the separation of like the with the east like the east to the west of how like this is this a part of the formation of this new tongue?
Well, I think that the internet has basically leveled out a lot of that. That's why a lot of some more regional accents are disappearing, while the accent overall American English is like standardizing. It's going to standardize closer to that. I mean, you can even like look. Everyone talks about like white kids in the suburbs using like hip hop speech or whatever, but that's just an effect of the fact that like we all speak like this now. Um, it's like just English now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
been politicized though, unfortunately. Like, if you like, people think you're affecting something if you're like appreciating the movement of the spirit, you could say, within our language. You're not supposed to, you're supposed to talk one way. You're supposed to talk white, for instance, so you can see like the sort of class dynamics within the way we treat language itself.
Yeah.
Kanye says this and he gets criticized, right? He's like talking about how like English isn't their like native tongue. Like, he's like, we're using like, I don't use I don't spell things the right way or whatever. I might use the wrong words, etc. But he's just making it his own. Like, I thought it was funny, like when he Death Con, he wrote Death Con because the THF like merger is much more of a thing in African American vernacular English.
Oh, I used to get like bullied for that all the time. They'd be like, "Bro, is death not deaf?" And I'd mix like a lot of
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
up.
It's yeah, that's a very common one.
It's funny. Like this. Also on the heading on the Michael Hudson note. Is this and like the biblical like yeah, when I asked you, I was like, yeah, is America like Sodom and Gomorrah? And like, is this yeah, yeah, like, is it just because of this like complete forgetting and the remembrance in this ordinance? Because like I had still like the
This is what
residue.
happens when you become an empire.
Yeah, yeah. Because like the residue of like, when I like uh I guess like just this maybe like hyper cognition. I wanted to ask a question about like how like to out reason these people out of faith, because like I'll be telling people like of faith like oh well, like, like kind of
You
like
can't really.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's kind of like kind of what I assume, because it's like, I'll be telling them like so, like I'll be like, oh, like, well, like what about like why do you like money and like cryptocurrency, when like what about like Timothy like 6:10 or something, and then they'll be like, well, it's like, oh, it's like we're not loving money, but like I was like, well, love is recognition, and like, kind of like going down that, like trying to
Yeah.
explain that to them.
Yeah, you're talking to someone who worships capital and you're like, why do you worship capital? And they're like, because it gives me everything that I want. And it's like, okay, what about like satisfaction? Are you satisfied in your life? And they're like, oh, I don't know, kind of, maybe, I'd be more satisfied to have more money. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, do you like I've been thinking about a lot of like the circuits of like capital, like in the sense of like, like Adam Smith and the tradition of like MCM and like the money, commodity, and commodity money and such.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about it in the sense of like with the with commodity money commodity, when you go down this ontology, it's always ends up in a surplus, because when you end back to the commodity sublated, it's always there's always a surplus and less of the focus on just money is just a means to an end instead of its actual realization, which is what I see with like when you're stuck inside the money commodity money circuit, where you're kind of just like idle, yeah, you're just idolizing mammon and
Yeah.
such.
Yep. Many such cases, man. I mean, how much more blatant can it get these days? Like, you've got like the cryptocurrency exchange, which is like linked up with the Democratic Party and like the Azov battalion, effectively just washing money in a giant loop.
Yeah, no, Michael Hudson's right. It's the party of the 1%.
Yeah, no, it's like we live in the kingdom of the Antichrist. Like we were once the hope of the world, in the sense that we were like opposed to this unipolar dominance over finance and world trade that was operating out of like Rome and Venice, and then later London, and now it's New York. So
Yeah, did you see that thing that Ed Berg posted where it was like that dude on TikTok was like going over how like the Alamo is like the Temple of Solomon, and like I get
yeah,
and yeah.
no, people do that because they don't have any connection to the actual history of it. Like, like they're like, okay, so I can understand like the symbolism here. But instead of like understanding this metaphorically, which is like metaphorically true, like America is Babylon or Egypt, etc., in a sort of spiritual sense, they can only they make a direct like equation in like a
Yeah,
literalist manner, which
yeah, like
doesn't
the
actually apply
phonetic.
in this time. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
because they don't get taught anything about world history. They like hold these centuries, if not millennia, of human existence, which are just like vague in their, or they might even say, oh well, the world's probably actually much shorter, and they added like 1,000 years in there or whatever. There's a bunch of people who come up with really massive copes for a failure to investigate the actual documentation of these time periods, which are documented in myriad ways. We know more about them now than we ever have in all of human history. It's like, I like the Michael Hudson's flex in one of his recent things where he's like, yeah, well, like the equation, like the things that people are learning in economics now are not nearly as complicated or as precise as the Babylonians are doing in
Yeah, they're
1750
quadratics
BC.
for play.
Yeah, they already had calculus. Like, they were doing derivatives and shit in Babylon.
Yeah, like when I talk to like yeah, people just got like I don't know, just like since they don't have such a kaleidoscopic view. Like I was talking to my one coworker who like grows and cultivates and stuff, and he was telling me about like how he's like, yeah, there's just too much people on the world, man. I'm a tree hugger, but like I also hate the George Soros agenda, and I'm just like, oh okay.
Yeah, no, that's the beauty of what they've been able to accomplish is that they've made it seem that like all of these like counter establishment ideals aren't actually just like fully on board with like the plans for the world. Like the whole like, oh, I'm a dissident, billions must die, I'm an edgelord, and there's too many people, and it's like, okay, well,
The
they mean
Asimov
you.
figures are right. Like you gotta like check the.
It's like when you say that, you're talking about yourself, like you're thinking it's about others, but actually the people that who say that, who have the power to affect that, are talking about you. And they they don't realize that. They think
Yeah,
they're the elite.
but then they'll be so fervently like against like Mao or something. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's like Mao did kill a lot of people, but like I'm against. I want a lot of death, but I don't want a lot of death in that way. If we're
Yeah, no,
portraying
not in a
it,
cringe way, but in a cool way.
yeah, I feel bad because most of these people are like, yeah, like you were talking on that Red Scare podcast. I was listening. You were like, oh yeah, there's like 50-year-olds who just like watch cartoons and stuff, and like even my coworker, that one who was a crypto bro, he was like I was trying to like clock out, and this dude was showing me just a 5 minute clip of like some 50s Disney, of some 50s Disney like sing along, and I was like, no, dude, this is like openly pagan. Like I'm trying to like clock out.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I'm just bearing witness here. That's all I'm here to do. Anyway, is there anything more specific I could help you out with? Otherwise, I got this guy and waiting in line here for my services. Are you satisfied with your service?
I'm satisfied with my service. Thank you,
All
sir.
right,
You have a good rest of your day.
beautiful. You too, man. All right, political AI art. All right, this isn't a bot. It'll be interesting if I just hear like a fax machine. What's up, dude?
Hey, what's good, logo? What's up with
Just
you,
chilling,
bro?
man. Literally chilling. It's fucking cold. Hello, Mr. AI art. Are you there? Okay, disappeared. All right, he's trying to get back on. All right, political.
Yo, can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up,
Hey,
dude?
what's up, man? Sorry, I got McDonald's Wi-Fi. You feel me? Like it's really bad out here, but I'm gonna make this very short. I'm gonna be very direct. I wanted to know if you think Playboy Cardi's a Christian.
Probably not. I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. I think he's he what does that mean? What does it mean? I can't know the hearts of someone, but I think he's pretty obviously like a kind of individualist in that sense. Like he's like a rep, like does a kind of punk rock 70s kind of look and things like that. He's pretty um
Like,
I don't
like
know.
he's a
So
narcissist, right?
yeah. I mean, he's like open about that. I think he's like an artist, so whatever he does that is good is inevitably going to like be recognized as good beyond what like his immediate purposes for it are. There's like great witnesses for the truth are people who are like opposed to it in some sense because they also like show like the where they're lacking. Also, Cardi's young. He's a young dude. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he's exactly at his peak of artistic performance yet. Maybe he is. I don't know. But the same thing is true of like Kanye at like a similar age or part of his career. Kanye was pretty ardently, if not satanic, at least like Luciferian in his Yeezus era, like Watch the Throne and things like that. He was getting pretty narcissistic in that sense. but inevitably that can't last. Like you're gonna get beat down in some way.
Word. Okay, what do you think about the aesthetic? Like, I'm pretty sure you've seen this before, where Ye is burning the church and he's doing like that live performance with Cardi.
I mean, I think that was like it was a representation, I think, of like that. It wasn't really supposed to be a church. It was his house, his childhood house.
Word. Okay.
So
All right.
he's like,
Yeah,
so
because
this
there's
thing
a
like
cross on
burning
that, so I
down,
was just wondering.
that burning down was his representation of like all of the things, like his sense of home. Like, he's lost his wife and his kids, etc. He's lost all of these things, and his mother's dead, etc. So he's like losing everything. So he's depicting that by the idea of like his childhood house being on fire and like him like being kind of like stranded in it. This is like his like psychological metaphor to represent like where he's at.
Damn. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think about it in that way, but what else I want to say? Oh yeah. Do you think Blade is a Jew?
Is what?
Is a Jew?
I don't know. Is he? I have no idea.
Word, bro. I'm gonna tell you, like, on
I
you
know he's
listen to
into the
Spider, right?
Kabbalah and stuff. I mean, he's like Blade is like pretty into. At least I can tell a lot of the esoterica. I mean, he makes reference to it a lot in his lyrics.
Yeah, bro. I actually met Blade. I don't know if I can screen record. Can I do that shit here? I don't know how to.
I don't know.
Fuck. Okay. But anyway, so I met Blade, right? And I spoke to him about Jesus, and he's read the Bible before. So I think he's like down, bro. I think he's like
Yeah,
the
I think he's.
direction he's taking, dog. Like when it comes to making his music clean, having the angelic references to the Old Testament, and so on. Like,
Yeah, literal Christ, literal Christ.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. Yeah. I mean, I think he's a really good artist. And symbolically, he's at least like working within like Christian symbolisms and things. I don't think there's other like, but at the same time, like I know this personally. On the arts, like on that side of Christianity, the sort of like institutional, or you could say more like antichrist churches, these people who like worship institutional forms of the Christianity as opposed to like the spiritual forms of it. They'll often be like, "Oh, this is all like satanic and evil." So he also, at the same time, is trying to distance himself from like I don't know the caricature of the bigoted Christian.
Word, yeah.
Because,
You
like,
know
I
what?
do the same thing, right? Where it's like I'm a Christian, but all these other Christians would call me a heretic and say that I'm not actually, because I got to go to church and like I got to check in with a priest, and I'm not, I'm disagreeing with one of the councils that they consider divinely inspired or whatever. So it's like
Yeah.
they just have that conception of it, and if that's the only conception we're going by, then I guess he's not a Christian in that sense. But I'd say he is in the more meaningful sense.
You know what? I think his direction is a little what do you call it? Like politically incorrect. You know, Wanda Mountain, the boy who got on what's it called? Nothing. That song, the Mongolian guy who did the Mongolian chanting.
Yeah.
He posted something like last week, which was an anti-vax post. And I look at Echo, like I've been following Echo for a long time. He always posts like Nazi symbolism, that kind of shit. Like you get what I'm going with
Well,
this?
they're
Like
all into like they're Swedes, right?
word, okay.
So like the Swedes, like they have this like they get attuned to like the whole like Hyperborea thing, right? Like the whole like they have their own like ancient history, which is like often not recognized as such, right? Like so I'm like, and that stuff touches directly with the kind of Volkish far right stuff, but it's not exclusively that. I mean, there are people using those very same runes to convert the Scandinavians to Christianity, but at the same time they had like their Odinism, which is like a unique form of paganism, which I would say emerges in like the first century AD, roughly at the same time as Christianity, and in fact informed somewhat by their contacts with Christianity. And that's really due to what was called the late antique ice age, which is when a comet blacked out the sky for a bit and it caused winters in like the summer across the whole world.
Oh,
Created huge population transfers, tons of plagues and droughts, etc. Huge population transfers. So especially up in the cold north, they faced it the worst, right? They had a huge population die off, and that's effectively where you get like these Viking slavery corporations and stuff kind of fill that void, because it became a true anarchy. It became a true anarchy of just like survival of the fittest in those conditions. And that's where that religion was really formed, that type of like Odinism, like what people are now trying to revive as like neo-paganism or whatever, really comes from that
yeah.
time period.
Damn, bro. So you know the whole lore behind Drake.
Yeah,
That's
I know
hilarious,
everything.
dog.
Well,
Yeah,
at
that's
least I know enough.
word. Okay, bro. So do you know King? Like King Me or Men and I?
No.
That's my bro. He's not in the stream, but we really dig your work. And we were talking like a couple nights ago. We have this theory called Trump was 20 years ago. And it's basically this idea that Gen Z is like crucial to American politics and that the only way you can win them over is not by like what do you call it, like policies and being anti-war, just being like political. It's like this post-political project that we're gonna start called Conquer the Youth. And basically the plan is to win Gen Z over aesthetics. So I'm talking about like getting opium, getting drain gang, all that kind of
Well, I think
aesthetics.
that's kind of what you're really saying is that like the problem, like Gen Z is like too cynical to believe that they're gonna have the meaning in their life given to them through some type of like political activism or whatever. Although I do see that like going on. That's sort of like what the millennials believed, right? Like that we become activists and then we'd be fulfilled in our lives, and we'll do something important just like the boomers did or whatever. But we're in a condition now where there's no like real feasible immediate first step politically. So what people are looking more for than anything is just a means of like making sense of what is going on, like making sense of things, because like the normative level, people are like depressed and anxious and all fucked up because they're surrounded by the full court press of full spectrum dominance and psychological operations and marketing and advertising and myriad social pressures trying to like take capital from them effectively, or like extract rents from them. So they're like, well, what's the point of anything then? Like, what's the point of even being alive? Which is why they're reaching for these sort of like esoteric types of truths and things. But there's a dangers in that too, because you can just be like, oh well, all of this stuff's fucking meaningless. So all that really matters is that I have to just get my bag however I need to get it. And that's sort of the ethos of a lot of poetry today too. Even is the poet being like, all I give a shit about is myself.
Word. Yeah, yeah. You know what? I actually agree with you. But I can contest to that a little because when I look at Kanye, I obviously think that Trump was 20 years ago. I think this man is like 100 years ahead of us, no joke. And I
Yeah.
say this because of aesthetics, because he has this immediate reaction to politics, and he makes like a moment in politics, if you get what I mean. Like when it comes to what he does with Balenciaga, the kind of clothes
Pretty
he
much
makes.
everything.
Yeah, everything, bro. Like he's culture. I think culture is bigger than politics.
Well, that's like, well, they're the same thing. That's the thing. There's like a good Marshall McLuhan book called "Culture Is Our Business," but that's what America is, a cultural empire, right? Like we have soft power and we have control over the world through this like massive adoption of American culture across the entire world. That's how we control things. So that's why like someone like Kanye is actually more important than a political figure in some senses, because he's not just talking about like immediate local concerns, but he's addressing what is effectively a global audience just by the fact of his position in this culture industry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hold on. What do you think about Kanye running? Like, do you think it's bad because he's gonna take Trump's votes, or is it like,
Well, I don't think Trump is going to be allowed to run. Number one, I think that we're starting to see already right now. They've got DeSantis is the guy. They've already chosen him, and they're trying to use this as a time to be like, okay, so Trump is officially over. The Trump era is officially done, and they're gonna like they don't want to win. They would rather have the party be completely like destroyed, just like by having like the Trump voters not vote for DeSantis so that they can be like, oh, look, the Trump voters were never real Republicans in the first place. They're a bunch of loonies and cranks or whatever.
yeah, that's what I'm
Um,
saying.
that's where we're at right now. Like, there's no way that Trump is going to be running and DeSantis won't be. It's going to be the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Okay.
gonna have all these people coming out like to defend DeSantis as like the more pragmatic option, and being things like all of the anti-Trump memes that were made up over time by people on the right and the left will be coming back in full force. Those things didn't exist when he first went to run through. It's a type of opposition that he doesn't actually have a plan for, because he doesn't have a plan, and so I don't think he's gonna run again. I think he's basically like a sin eater now, where it's like if to attach yourself to Trump is to go down with the ship, is the idea that's being
Damn.
presented here.
Okay. Yeah.
I
You
don't
know
th-
what?
like I like Trump personally. I think he was the best president of my lifetime, simply because he was in the way of so many worse things that probably would have happened. Um,
Mm,
but but I don't think that he represents like a positive thing. He's kind of like a pure negation That's why people voted for him as like a pure negation. But then
Yep.
he wasn't able to like sublate that and produce anything on it that was like that others would then have to react to. That's the same problem the Republicans have right now, is that they don't actually have a positive political platform. They just have they're just running as negating some things the Democrats have done, but they'll never negate everything the Democrats have done. They barely even make progress on negating. So what do they really do? They exist to just like provide an outlet for the negative energy.
Mm-hmm. You know what? Okay, so I'm a Zoomer, right? So when I think about like all everything that you just said, you're just talking about boomers and millennials because these are like the people voting for Trump. So going back to Trump being 20 years ago, I think you, Haas, everybody should be like following this lineage of thought. So before I like start explaining, do you know a guy named Trevor Bazile?
No, I don't know.
Okay, he's
I
like,
know what I'm talking about. Those people can find out about me. That's how I feel.
yeah, I'm gonna put him on actually. I'm gonna put him on you. I just gotta send him links and shit. But so Trevor Bazile is this guy. He got like, have you heard about the slogan "cancellation is currency"?
No, I don't know.
Okay, so that's from him. What he does is he makes projects in LA, like art venues, all that shit, and he gets like these big right wing people to fund it. And he's like this gay black man just making bank out of these people, putting art venues, putting political messages out there, and they fund it because it's like a money laundering operation, right?
Yeah, many such cases.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is like I think that we should be looking into the young folks before we look into the boomers and millennials because this is the building block of American politics at the moment. We're the people just today I saw like a lot of teenagers are against capitalism, and that means they're in favor of Nazism, right? Like when it comes to the green agenda, all that BS.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
so I
mean,
think,
I was going to say, if you look at the polling from like the elections that just happened, like the vast majority of people under 30, you could say, or like under 25 or whatever, first time voters, et cetera, they overwhelmingly go for the Democrats because there's not any positive thing. You have to become like a kind of cynical, jaded type of person to be passionate about just voting for the GOP no matter what. It's like that's something that's an old man's game. That is not really something the young are getting hyped on. Is like, oh, let's go vote for Mitch McConnell or whatever.
hmm yeah. So I think like here, this is my take. I think Gen Z is probably the most revolutionary generation in American politics, and the
I
reason
mean, I'd
is,
have to agree with you because they're the youngest right now, and that's where the revolutionary energies are going to be expressed first. So yeah, I mean, I like the millennials. Like we already have millennial Reich right now. Like this is what millennial politics looks like. Is Joe Biden as president? It's like that's
Mhm.
millennials and Gen X shaking hands on that to like own the boomers or whatever, just because I hate the boomers so much.
Yeah, bro. There's just like a big 180 going on when it comes to Andrew Tate, when it comes to Ye. Like my people are waking up, and it's like it's so immediate. That's the crazy thing because we see it happen once, so we're gonna constantly see it happen. It first happened with Tate, and a lot of us were pissed
What
off. And
makes
then
you guys more revolutionary, I think, is because you don't. Do you remember the Bush era?
I wasn't like really like
You weren't. No,
2001.
you don't
I was a
really
baby,
remember it,
bro.
right?
Huh?
You don't like really remember it. Like you were like too
I
young
wasn't
to have
even born,
memories of
bro.
it, really. Yeah, no, that's what I'm
I'm
saying.
a
That's
youngin',
all
yeah.
I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Because
Uh
the
huh.
thing is that my formative years politically, like growing up under the Bush era, like that's where like your cosmology of like how do things work is like basically like how you what you grew up under is kind of what you consider to be normative in a way. So like there's a ton of millennials and people my age who think that the norm is this type of like pseudo Christian fundamentalist war capitalist empire of like George Bush, being like
hmm
God told me to invade Iraq. But the norms now are like the people who grew up under Obama, right, and Trump, where it's like it's a completely new world after 2008, 2009 iPhones, etc. It's a complete discontinuity in some ways between those worlds. So you have like these people now who grew up like under Obama, and being cynical about Obama is something that millennials are very, very, very offended by. If you were to say
hmm
anything like, "Oh, Obama killed like so many children," Obama is fucking invading Libya, like Obama is just like all the rest. Obama sold us out to the bankers, etc. They'd be like, "No, that was the Republicans," and by that they mean the George Bush George Bush did that.
I
It was
see
all
where you're
George
going with
Bush's
this.
fault.
Yeah. So what you're saying is like Gen Z witnessed the Republicans doing it, and now we're seeing the Democrats doing the same shit.
Well, I'm
Is that what
saying
you're
that the
saying?
Gen Z witnessed that having Democrats in power is not different than having Republicans in power. That there is
Okay.
no difference between those things. Whereas millennials believe that the only reason why things aren't better now is because the Republicans stopped Obama from saving the world. Like Obama was going to save all of us, but then the mean, nasty, dirty Republicans wouldn't let him save everyone.
Hmm. Yeah. You know what? I 100% agree. Going back to opium real quick and just Playboy Cardi. Have you seen like? Are you on TikTok a lot?
I go on TikTok a little, but I'm not on it that much.
Okay. So like, Cardi's the trendsetter. Ye's the trendsetter. We all know this. But the thing with Cardi, bro, he's making up lingo. Same thing with Yeet. They're making up like lingo that we use, whether it be in the U.S., Western Europe, Canada.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying the same shit. Everybody's listening to the same shit. You go to a Playboy Cardi concert, you see people with clown masks, clown paint all over their face, and I think that like these people are a lot more powerful than a political party or a political stance because they change the youth. They conquer the youth.
Yeah, well,
So
culture is way. Art is always more. Art is long. Art lasts longer than these things, so it will have much more impact overall in the long term.
But what I want to know is, let's say we have a '60s in this generation, but without the CIA. Do you think it's possible to have like a not a hippie movement, obviously, but a movement where hip hop is
Well,
like the
well, you're always going to be dealing with the same things that those people ran into. Nothing changes in that sense, right? Like basically we've been told that there has been a new cultural revolution regarding like gender, etc. And so now there's like these new lines where if effectively you're not extremely on board with the new sexual revolution, then you're definitively reactionary according
hmm
to the new millennial consensus. So like you get to the point now where you have like these leftists or whatever, and they're like, yeah, the reason why, like, you should never say that Russia is in the right in this conflict because Russia is a homophobic country that doesn't allow transgender
yeah,
to blah blah
yeah.
blah blah blah. So that's really the defining issue. We've already had that kind of cultural
Uh-huh.
revolution.
You know what? You know what? You're gonna find this crazy, but I actually think this genderless thing is good, and I'm completely against it. Now, let me tell you why. It's a very what do you guys call it? A dialectical process. That Arca. Like these tranny artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Arca is a mecha tanky. She is the first mecha tanky
Oh no,
to
I think
roam
that
the
there's
web.
like I have a lot of trans friends and things like that. I have no real issue with people doing like dressing however they please or whatever, or like, if they want to affect more feminine attributes. I don't really care if they'd like to do that. The thing I'm saying is that it's that a lot of those people are also some of the first to like actually turn on the propaganda of it because they actually have to deal with the material reality of those things. There's people who are realizing that like when they were giving their like affirmative consent and things like that, that they were getting kind of they didn't learn the full consequences of the types of pharmaceuticals they were being put on. In fact, I saw a good TikTok the other day where this
Mm.
girl who was becoming a trans man like years ago or whatever, so she was put on test. Um, and like is like detransitioning or whatever. When she goes to doctor, she says that if she said that she was considering gender transition and took testosterone, they'll treat her one way. But if she says that she was abusing anabolic steroids and taking testosterone for that reason, they'll treat her completely differently. If she
Mhm.
says the former, like I was taking these things because of my gender identity, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's good, that's fine. There's not that we don't know that much about the consequences of these for your health. But if she says that she was abusing anabolic steroids and taking the exact same chemicals, they'll say, oh, we know exactly what these consequences are, and this is how it's going to impact your health in these myriad ways. So there actually is like an ideological like screen that these people encounter in real life with just by being who they are between the propaganda around this phenomenon and its actual material reality. So yeah, I think they are often in the place to know the most about these sorts of things.
Do you know Sophie, the singer?
Yeah,
Have you seen the music video for Face Shopping?
I don't think so. I haven't watched a lot of music videos of recent stuff.
Word. Okay. Yeah. I think she's more conservative than MAGA Republicans because she like deconstructs faciality in the music video of Face Shopping, and it's like you look at her crowds. Like I'm a concert goer, bro. I love like seeing people live. I don't care who you are, but I want to see your people and the kind of music you make. So when I see Arca, I see a bunch of like a bunch of Venezuelans coming together and just like starting this new movement in America. And it's like a beautiful thing to see because they're like, I wouldn't say assimilating their culture, but they're just binding the two.
Yeah, I think that's like the other thing about Gen Z is like I think that the color line or something like the kind of notion of like subculture is kind of gone now. Which is like people have lamented that like the era of poptimism, but I think it's kind of being like in a sort of dialectical way. It's opened itself up to a like new Americanism in the sense that like what is it to be an American now? It's like you like Chief Keef. You know what I mean? And it's like
Yeah,
Chief
yeah.
Keef is beloved by everyone, right? Like so it's like but like when I was growing up, hip hop wasn't something that I got to engage with much because it wasn't really a part of my world. I'm in like a 98% white like hill town, you know what I'm saying? So it's
Hmm.
not like we were into like hardcore punk and stuff like that. And if we got like any contact with rap music, etc., it'd be through like TV and radio, and not even local radio, but like main big radio stations that were playing it, like usually out of one of the cities like nearby. And it wasn't really a part of youth culture. In fact, like millennials kind of looked down on hip hop earlier on. Like you have these like punk goes crunk was a thing in the
Hmm.
2000s where you had like AFI and Fall Out Boy were at the same time as like Kanye West and uh and these other Lupe Fiasco, etc., that whole wave of
Yeah.
rappers. But
Bro,
it's
you know
really
what's
like you get to
crazy
Kid
about Lupe?
Cudi. Kid Cudi is the moment where there's like this type of acceptance of rap that happened under like Pitchfork when they started like reviewing Jay-Z and Kanye West albums as if they were worth reviewing. Um, this type of audience didn't exist before. Like you either basically listened to like rock music and independent rock music, or you were like listening to these things that had everything to do with your background. But as culture has opened up in this marketplace to the degree that like everyone can kind of listen to everything or is exposed to everything, that's where a lot of the cultural panic from older generations come from. Like all their kids are just listening to rap music, etc., and they get alienated by that because they're like low key like pretty racist and they don't think that rap music is music. They'll even say, um, but I think that like everyone under a certain age like has no bigotries in that sense against rap. It's actually kind of an affectation to be like, oh yeah, rap sucks now. It's like you have to be an edgelord to say something like that.
Hmm. No, you got to be a leftist to say some shit like that. That's the only people who say that. Not even like right wing racist boys in like the
Yeah,
country
this
say
was
that.
like this was kind of preempted. Do you remember when Odd Future like first came out and like
Yep.
Keegan and Sarah and like all of these people like they got banned for like homophobia and things
Hmm.
like that? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's literally that, bro. Let me tell you my vision. I'm thinking about January 6th, Capitol Hill riots, but Sunday service edition. Like that.
Yeah,
That's what
I
needs
mean,
to go down.
yeah, like I've been saying the whole time that like all you have to really do is you have to create a space that people would rather inhabit. That's it. So it's like the thing is that we're all inhabiting these digital spaces, etc. But there's really not really that many physical places left that people want to inhabit. So I think the key would be like creating physical places that people actually want to go to.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
you
like the
know,
Sunday service is like that for a reason, right? And it's like not even just to be there, but to be witness to it so that you could like post it online, I guess, even, right? Like that's half the reason people go to concerts now, right? Is to like post their films of them like at the concert. That's why Cardi does his shows the way he does them, is like where like the audience is kind of the thing under the spotlight and not even the performance.
facts, facts.
So
Yeah.
to create something like that, more of those, not even necessarily spectacles, but like more occasions, more spaces that people would actually want to inhabit, while like talking about these sorts of things. It's just, that's all we can really do.
Hmm. Yeah, like going back to cancellation is currency. That's exactly what you're describing. You get canceled and you're up the charts. That's the
Yeah.
way you make out of the game. Like you got to be canceled.
Yeah. In some ways. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Like yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say, man. We actually agree on like pretty much all of this shit.
Yeah.
I'm
No, it's nice
surprised.
talking to you, man. Are you satisfied with your service?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna go with premium next time, though. I gotta
All
get Hans
right. All
on
right.
this. I gotta tell him about this, bro. Because actually, you know what? Can I get? I'm already like moderating YouTube. I'll just do this shit some other time and try to get you on the pod so we could talk about this.
Sure. Yeah, man. I'm always down to talk to whoever. I'm
All
I'm
right,
down
word.
for whatever, man. But yeah, it's getting fucking cold out here though. It's literally 30 degrees outside. I've been out here for a while. Getting a little chilly. So
Word.
I'm probably
Yeah.
gonna
Go to Starbucks. Get some coffee, bro.
yeah, dude, I don't go to Starbucks. I make my own coffee. We don't even have
I'm just
Starbucks
fucking
around
with you,
here.
bro.
It doesn't even exist.
Damn. Okay.
It's all Dunkin' Donuts up here, buddy.
Nice, nice. Yeah, over here we got Timmy's, Tim Hortons. You
Oh,
ever
you
heard
got
about that?
Timmy's, yeah. Yeah, I know
Yeah,
what's up.
it's good stuff.
All right, man.
All
Well,
right,
thanks for
man.
coming on.
Yeah, for sure. God bless.
Peace.
Bye bye.
All right. I'm just gonna try to see if I can get a good run on finger picking. I've been trying to warm up my fingers because it's really cold. It's hard to do when it's so cold. But have a good one, Dace.